Hi, I'm Ash and welcome to this review of the Carve 3 foil from Duotone. The video shows the Carve 3 950, which I borrowed on demo from the Water Sports Centre. Links are in the description. I wasn't the first to borrow this foil, so there is a little beach rash on the foil, as where we sail it is stony beaches. These tiny scratches would not affect the performance, but I mention them as they will be visible in the video of the foil. The Carve 3 950 is a 950 area foil with a span of 81 cm and an aspect ratio of 6.9. This is very much a mid-aspect foil. It comes with the PX 175 tail, which is built for speed and carve. I also tested the 800 Carve 3, which is an 800 area 75 cm span and 7.0 aspect ratio. This foil was tested on a Duotone demo day where I had the use of the smaller Carve 3 for an hour or so. So the bulk of this review will be on the 950, which I had much more time with. The Carve is listed by Duotone as its surf, freestyle, prone or kite foiling foil. So with winging in mind, this is designed for jumping and surfing large swells or waves. The Carve 3 on test is the D-Lab or monoblock version. You can also get the Carve 3 in an SLS version that is just a front foil that bolts to an aluminium fuselage. The D-Lab is all carbon, including the fuselage. For this test, the Carve was used with the 37 cm fuselage. The Carve 3 950 was tested with a D-Lab Slim 94 cm mast and the Carve 3 800 with the D-Lab Slim 82 cm mast. Let's get into the review where we follow a structure. That structure is that we look at pumping onto foil, low speed, high speed, glide, pump, jumping, breaching, tip stall, surfing, chop handling and maneuverability. So let's start all of that with pumping onto foil. When it comes to pumping onto foil, then we have an obvious difference between the two sizes of foil, as the 950 is a relatively large area foil by today's standards and the 800 is smaller and faster, but obviously with less lift. The 950 was exceptionally easy to pump onto foil, lifting very progressively with speed. It has a very soft stool on it, which means that even if you try to force it up too quickly, it does not stool hard and crash back down, but tends to kind of dip and then try to recover. This is really part of the DNA of the Carve in that it's designed for jumping and landing from jumps and bouncing back onto foil, so it has a very forgiving lift and stall profile. The 800 of course required a little more speed and the stall was slightly more abrupt than the 950, but I would still put it into the quite friendly stall category. Both the 800 and 950 lift very progressively, which is a little different to the previous Carve, which had a more aggressive lift on takeoff rather than being more linearly progressive in how it lifts. Overall, it is quite user friendly here, and certainly the 950 would be possible for a beginner, although maybe the 1100 would be a better choice for beginners. For intermediates, the 950 would make a good light wind foil when matched with a suitable narrower mid-length board like the Skybridge. The 800 is for stronger winds and would make a good complement foil to the 950 for days where you are powered on a 5 metre or thinking of dropping down to a 4 metre. The Carve 3 has a better low end or low speed capability than the previous Carve 2. With the Carve 950 you can get almost to walking pace before it feels like it's going to drop off foil, plus when it does drop it is a slushy soft drop rather than a hard unexpected crash down off of foil. The 800 of course requires a bit more speed. Overall both foils have quite a generous low end, not quite as much as a Whizz but certainly very respectable. The best example I have of this on video is this tack out of a backwind ride where the foil does a very soft stall due to lack of speed on the exit. You can see the speed is slow and the foil takes a gentle dip before recovering. The new Carve 3 is similar in speed to the previous Carve 2. It does have a decent turn of speed. It of course isn't a race foil, and if anything I would say the newer shape Carve 3 has taken a small amount of DNA from the Glide and mixed that with the Carve 2 to make the Carve 3. So we have a similar top end, but pump and glide are both improved due to that glide DNA. It certainly doesn't feel slow like the Whizz, and you can push it quite hard without feeling like you're coming up against a wall where it won't go any faster, which was something I did feel on the Whizz. As already mentioned, the Carve 3 has taken a little DNA from the Glide in terms of its design, and due to this, the Glide is certainly improved over the Carve version 2. Don't expect it to be exactly like the Glide though. It does slow down more quickly when you come off the power, whereas the Glide will maintain speed for longer. Overall, there is definitely glide there, and you can certainly make use of that on smaller wind-blown bumps, but do expect it to loosen speed and then require you to start pumping to maintain speed. Overall, this foil has some remarkably good glide that you might not expect to get from a mid-aspect foil. If you want more, then you have the option to go to the Glide series of foils. Pumping is definitely improved over the Carve version 2. You can now accelerate this foil onto the swell bump ahead or the swell bump behind in wind-blown swell. You do have to work to maintain your speed, more than with something like the D-Lab Glide, but it definitely does have significantly better pump capability now, which was lacking in the Carve version 2. The pump itself is uncomplicated, and on the 37cm fuselage, the foil does not feel too stiff and pumps relatively easily. Both the 950 and the 800 Carve 3 have plenty of pop for jumping, and they both re-establish water flow and get back onto foil quickly if you land your jump well, something I'm not particularly great at. A lot of my jump issues are down to using a 94cm mast rather than the 82cm, where jumping is a lot easier and controllable. Jumping on a Carve versus jumping on a D-Lab Glide are certainly very different. The Carve is much easier to pop out of the water and generates lift and height easily, whereas you have to really rely on speed to get height with the Glide rather than it being generated from the foil pop. Of course, the Carve 3 is designed for jumping, so it should be no surprise that this is one of its strong categories. The breach on the Carve 3 is really quite non-eventful. It establishes foil flow really quickly after breaching, so often you don't touch down at all and recover before the board hits the water. This of course depends on the breach. My breaches tend to be at speed and only popping the foil out of the water at a shallow angle. If you breach it hard and low speed, as beginners often do, then you would expect the board to hit the water and recovery to be less graceful. I think the takeaway here is that for intermediate riders, you'll benefit from the friendly stall recovery, whereas beginners will tend to breach harder and slower and may not feel the benefit. Personally, I didn't get the foil tips out of the water that often when testing. Unlike the Glide, the Carve is not a high span foil or high aspect ratio, so getting a tip out of the water requires quite a serious commitment to board angle. I often get tip breaches on the D-Lab Glide in 360s or hillside tacks, but with the Carve 3 the span just isn't wide enough that this happens for me. I did get the occasional tip breach through the top of a wave or piece of chop, and I did not suffer any crashes down off of foil, so I don't believe there is any issue to document here with regard to tip stalls and tip breaching. We are currently in late spring in the UK, and unfortunately that means that spring or autumn storms are no longer with us, so my opportunity to ride large swell is now quite limited. I did get to ride the Carve on some relatively small windblown swell, and on the larger swells I could certainly feel it starting to lift and glide, so I don't feel you necessarily need the most powerful swell to ride with the Carve 950, as it was starting to work on tiny little windblown bumps. The Carve is designed to serve larger, more powerful waves, as its name suggests, but unfortunately I've not been presented with opportunity to fully exploit that due to the time of year. Where I ride, there is always chop to be dealt with at all times of the year, and it is one of the characteristics of the piece of water that I use that it can get very choppy at high tide. The Carve deals with chop quite capably, and there was never a time where I felt like it was picking up too much lift and giving me a bumpy, uncontrollable ride, either with the 950 or the 800. Of the two, the larger foil would be the most susceptible to chop, and I never felt like it was hard or difficult to ride in our ever-present choppy high tide conditions. The Carve 3 is definitely manoeuvrable. The foil is looser in roll than the D-Lab Glide and definitely likes to be banked and carved hard. Certainly in a hillside tack where you want a really tight arc carved through the eye of the wind, the Carve 3 proved a lot easier to get that tight turning circle with plenty of control. The downside being you have a little less time than you might have on a D-Lab Glide because it doesn't have the same amount of time that it will glide off the power. Hillside tacking the D-Lab Glide versus the Carve was two different techniques. The Carve is bank it really hard and get the tack done super fast, as you haven't got that glide to extend, but you have got the Carve to get you round quickly. The Glide is the opposite, less banking and a less fast turn, but more time due to the extended glide characteristics. Unlike the Whizz, the Carve manoeuvrability is mostly in the roll axis and not in the yaw axis. Between the two, I would say the Whizz is more like riding a shortboard for slashing turns, whilst the Carve is more like riding a longboard for more sweeping turns on the wave face. The Carve is really aimed at intermediates or experts in terms of the target audience or the rider who would get the most out of it, although I have no doubt the larger sizes could easily be ridden by a beginner, maybe the 1100 size or larger. The type of rider interested in this foil would be freestylers looking to jump, or wave sailors looking to ride larger windblown swell, or indeed proper waves. In terms of pros and cons, there are definitely more pros than cons with this foil. The pros are that it has good speed, it has a soft stall rather than a hard stall, so it's really easy on the rider when it does stall. And that stall does come really quite late at quite slow speeds. It's very manoeuvrable in the roll axis, not so much in the yaw axis, so it's definitely a foil that gives you confidence because the yaw axis is not very loose. It's very easy to ride, really simple foil to ride, doesn't do anything unexpected, and it has good glide for a mid-aspect foil, remarkably good glide for a mid-aspect foil. The cons are that when you do take advantage of that glide, the speed does drop off quite quickly when you come off the power and flag the wing. You can maintain if there is a little push on the swell or wave, but you do end up pumping a bit sooner than you would with something like the D-Lab Glide. In terms of cost, the Carve 950 is £908, and that is a front foil and tail set. So it's the 950 front foil and the PX 175 tail for £908. And then for the 800 Carve 3, it's £858, and that includes the PX 160 tail. For what are monoblock foils, I think these are actually pretty good value for money, given the price does include the tail stabilizer as well. If you are budget conscious, then you can of course go to the SLS Carve, which is not a monoblock but a bolt-on front wing to Duotone's aluminium 3BS fuselage. That's everything for this review. I hope it's been helpful. I'd like to thank the Watersports Centre and Duotone for the two demo foils. Links are in the description, and I'll see you on the next video.